Avengers Endgame came out a couple of years ago now, and was the highest grossing film of all time, finally unseating this godforsaken thing. Ugh. This film was a pop cultural event unlike any other I had ever experienced in my life, and it's probably the same for many of you. It was the almost perfect finale to every single MCU film. Almost perfect. So as you could probably guess by now from the title, I'm gonna do a little bit of complaining about Avengers Endgame. But you wanna know what I won't complain about? You subscribing. It would mean a lot, and hey, why not, it's free. Anyway, now that my shameless begging is out of the way, let's get into the video. Avengers Endgame was truly almost a perfect ending to the MCU, and doesn't receive the same large-scale criticism by fans that other major finales have over the past few years, such as Game of Thrones Season 8 and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. But there are some issues in this film that have slowly eroded it, for me. The MCU is truly a storytelling accomplishment like no other. There are now over 23 films set in this universe that have come out over the past few years, most of which are really good. Marvel employed a genius technique for world building that they called phases, which on a large scale followed a 3-act structure. Phase 1 was our introduction to the universe and its rules. During this period we meet some of the major players, future plot lines are set up, and we get the ground rules. Phase 2 is the expansion of this world. We meet new characters, go to new places, we get a more fleshed out and developed look into the universe. The characters grow and are taken into new directions. The main plot points are brought right up to their almost climax, which then leads us into Phase 3. Phase 3 was the climax and resolution of everything that came before it, with almost every movie setting up the chessboard for Infinity War, moving around characters and getting all the plot points just to where they needed to be. Marvel movies were at their absolute peak in popularity when Avengers Endgame came out. Over the past few years, Marvel have been releasing banger after banger. In my humble opinion, the Phase 3 films are what make the MCU truly great. During this era, we got Captain America Civil War, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War, and this. Okay, mostly bangers. Many of these Phase 3 movies hold a special place in my heart, since most of them came out when I was still in high school. Each one felt like more than a movie. They felt like an event, an episode of one huge TV show. I remember going with my friends every time a new one came out, and we would always make a big day out of seeing one of these movies. These films really felt like they were something special back then, and Avengers Endgame was the peak of all this. But up to this point, the writers at Marvel had made a very conscious effort to keep the continuity coherent. When Avengers Endgame came along though, some of the cracks started to show. The plot of this film, coupled with the plot of Infinity War, in a vacuum without context anyway, are absolutely ridiculous. A purple alien collecting a bunch of colorful magic rocks so he can use them to wipe out half of all life in the universe? And then the heroes must time travel to fix it? Truly insane stuff. Also, side note, once Thanos had all the Infinity Stones, why didn't he just wish for double the resources instead of killing half of all life in the universe? If he was compassionate as he says he is, like honestly, if that had been his goal, the Avengers would have probably helped him. And why wait until now? He seemed to get the stones so easily that he really could have just started collecting them at any point. Anyway. But Marvel has been so consistent with its plotting, rules, and lovable characters that the ridiculous plot was something the whole world was excited for. With the introduction of time travel though, some of the seams begin to burst. The film makes a big point in the plot about not doing anything to change the past, or else literal plot holes in the universe will be created. So what do the time-traveling Avengers do? They proceed to go back throughout history and create dozens of problems with continuity. An example of one of the smaller issues this film creates is that Loki escapes during the 2012 Avengers film, which would have a huge impact on everything Loki related that happens after this film, in regards to Thor 2, Thor Ragnarok, and Avengers Infinity War. Simply put, even just a small thing like Loki getting away fundamentally changes everything, and there are numerous other small examples of continuity breaks like that throughout the film. Also, apparently Gamora dying twice sets up for the Guardians of the Galaxy going on a quest to find her alive again somehow. Well, they need to cram her into Guardians of the Galaxy 3 somehow. Probably the biggest offender of this plot hole creation though is the inclusion of 2014 Thanos. By having Thanos time travel to the present from 2014 and bringing literally every character with any relation to him with him, and then killing all of them off pretty much breaks the entire universe. That prevents either Guardians of the Galaxy from happening, and since he himself is in the present and dies there, everything he does between Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers Infinity War simply cannot happen. which in turn makes the entirety of the MCU after that point one big time travel paradox. It's a real shame the film creates all of these problems because Marvel have been so dedicated to keeping the continuity unbroken for so long. I think the canon is going to become a lot more confusing and less coherent in the future because of this, which brings me to my next point. Why all the time travel shenanigans are a problem in the first place. When I went to see Avengers Endgame, as I mentioned previously, it was the single biggest movie event in history. The theater was jam-packed. The audience erupted in applause at Thanos dying, and gave a standing ovation when Tony Stark utters the arguably now single most famous line in cinema history, "I am Iron Man," before snapping his fingers. At the time, this film felt like the perfect conclusion. We got an epic final battle, we got to go through the past 10 years of the MCU and revisit some of the best parts, and all the characters had satisfying endings. Even if it did create a couple of plot holes, who cares? It was a grand finale after all. But the problem lies in the fact that Avengers Endgame is not the final. Marvel has plans to release films until the end of time if they can help it. Because so many more films and major plot events are planned for after this movie, it doesn't quite feel earned. It would be fine and dandy if the heroes won and all the survivors lived happily ever after, but instead the universe goes almost completely back to normal with no consequences for the in-universe biggest historical event ever. In Spider-Man Far From Home, aside from Tony Stark dying, the events of Endgame are treated as a running joke. Society is completely rebuilt and back to normal in less than a few months after Endgame takes place. Everyone is adjusted to life as it used to be, and the apocalyptic world we saw at the beginning of Avengers Endgame has vanished. In addition to this, many of the planned projects in the future are based on characters that died during Endgame. We're getting a Black Widow movie? Who cares, she's dead. We're getting a Loki TV show that will seemingly resurrect the character once again? Big whoop-de-fucking-do. We are getting a WandaVision show that will seemingly revive Vision in some way? Jesus Christ, guys! The pattern here is that there are no true consequences for what happened in these films. Nobody is truly dead. Marvel can bring anyone they want back at any time. The universe itself is not truly affected by what Thanos did, it just goes back to normal. It's been confirmed for some time now that Marvel wants to take the MCU in the direction of multiple universes, which means they can bring literally anyone they want back into the fold, including Iron Man if they can bribe Robert Downey Jr. with enough money to come back again. I hate this alternate universe stuff in superhero canon. It always overcomplicates everything, destroys canon, and is used chiefly as a deus ex machina for the writers to pretty much do whatever the fuck they want. Avengers Endgame could have been the perfect conclusion, if it had actually just been the conclusion. Marvel was at the height of its popularity when this film came out, and it was the perfect place to end the series. Even though Marvel plans to keep pumping out films and TV shows until the sun literally explodes and leaves Earth a flaming ball of nothingness, I personally think it will never reach the same amount of cultural relevance it had during Phase 3 up until Endgame ever again. Simply put, Marvel has worn out its welcome. Does this mean I'm done watching Marvel-related content? Probably not. I'm curious to see what they do with some of their franchises going forward, such as Spider-Man and especially Guardians of the Galaxy, but I'm at the point where I simply don't care enough anymore to religiously watch every show and movie they put out. 23 movies of continuity is impressive, but when you break it and introduce so many new deus ex machinas and plans to make movies forever, it loses something. I'm 20 now and I'm barely excited for anything they have planned. I'm not going to be 30 sitting in a movie theater watching Iron Man 7. And the more movies that take place in this canon and the more complicated the story gets, the harder it will be for new younger audiences to get into the films. Avengers Endgame would have been the perfect finale, if only it had truly been the end. Oh boy, I can't believe they got Robert Downey Jr. back for Iron Man 7!
Yo, listen here, son, you messed with the wrong guy, man. You know why? Because I am... Oh my